Welcome to Retire Coast, where we discuss all things retirement, life on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and your financial welfare. Bill Anderson, your host, is a serial entrepreneur having created many successful businesses and holds a real estate broker's license, speaks about personal experiences with each topic. Listen, learn, and improve the quality of your life.
Welcome back to Retire Coast podcast. It's been a while since I did one, and I'm going to start with this one, which is important to a lot of people. I know because I'm in the real estate business, and foreclosures are on the rise. We still have a relatively small number nationwide compared to what has been the process years and years ago. Nevertheless, people are falling on hard times now, and they're getting closer and closer to making some key decisions about their future. And one of the things that they need to decide is, what do we do? We can't afford to keep this house. We can't afford to make this payment. Are we going to walk away? Are we going to let them foreclose on us? What are we going to do? And I'm here to give you a number of solutions for your problem so that you can potentially keep your house. There are two groups of people, basically, that I want to address. One is if you have a source of income, and that source of income can make payments on your house, but you're late on making your payments because you had an unexpected medical bill, your car was trashed, something like that came along, and you took the mortgage payments and you made those payments. But in the future, you have enough income to make those payments. Well, that puts you in a category that lenders will want to work with, and that's where I'll go in just a minute. I also want to talk to the other group, essentially. There's obviously different situations, but essentially another group, and that's the one that has lost the source of income that was used to make the mortgage payments. If you've lost your job, your wife's lost your job, you've had a death in the family, a whole lot of reasons why your source of income has essentially dried up and you can no longer make those mortgage payments, that puts you in a different category. And believe it or not, you do have some choices, and we're going to come back to you also. But let me pop back to this group of you that are still employed, and you're seeing that your cash flow is drying up. You're using money that you have in your 401k, or you've got stored someplace in another account, and that money is dwindling away. So we want to get to the bottom of this right away before you run out of money entirely, and then you have nothing. No house to live in, no car, no place to go. So the first thing we want to do is we want to talk about going to your finance company. Now, a lot of people ignore the finance company. They ignore the notices that come out, and that's wrong. It really is. I know that it's possibly embarrassing for you to talk to the finance company. It's embarrassing to admit that you can't afford to make the payments, but you have to come to grips with that immediately. Time is not on your side here, because depending on the state law, they can foreclose within 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. It doesn't give you much time, depending again on the state that you live in. So you want to jump on this right away. And if you contact your lender and say, look, I have the funds to pay my payment in the future. I had some issues that prevented me from making the payments. My mistake. I should have done it, but I didn't. Here we are, and I don't want to lose my house. So you can do what's called a pre-foreclosure or forbearance with your mortgage lender, which most of them are going to be amenable to working with you. The last thing they want is your property. They do not want it. There are lots of costs involved. They're not in the property ownership business. And most of the people we call the lender, they're not a lender. They are a mortgage servicing company. They do not own your mortgage. They just collect the funds for the people that own your mortgage, which could be an individual, it could be a corporation. It doesn't really make any difference, but they are authorized to do almost anything that's necessary to keep that house from failing and from going into final foreclosure. So they put it into what they call forbearance or pre-foreclosure. If after answering some questions and you can provide some information for them, they will say, okay, look, we're going to stop this process right now and we're going to make some changes. So the first thing that they might want to do is a loan modification. And they have several choices. One is they can reduce the interest rate for you so you can afford to make that payment down the road. They can change the term. They can extend the term. They can reduce the principal for you. And so those are all choices. Now, basically what they probably will do is they will add the debt, the 2 or 3 months or so. You probably don't have too many months or you would have already been foreclosed. They will add it to the back of the loan, and that's called loan modification. Or they will ask you to start making those payments, say in a month. They might give you a couple of months delay in the payments. They'll put those, of course, in the back as well, because every single day you owe them interest, every day. And all of that being accumulated. So if they tell you you don't need to make payments for the next month or two as part of the solution, don't fool yourself. You're going to be paying that interest later on down the road. Now, maybe what they may do is change your payment because you're going to tell them basically, I can keep making the same payment, the $1,500 a month I've been making. I just didn't do it for these reasons, but I have the income and I'm proving it to you to keep making these payments down the road. So that modification won't look the same as a modification for someone who is possibly able to make, let's say, not the $1,500, but maybe the $1,200. Maybe there's 2 incomes in the household and one income has been lost for maybe 6 months or 9 months, something like that, until they find another job. In which case, what they may do is, going back to what I mentioned, is lower your payment for a specific period of time and then raise the payment after that. There are many, many options here that they can do to help save you. Now, you're going to have to pay everything. There's no free lunch here. You're going to have to pay back any benefits that they gave you unless they decide to reduce the interest rate, which has happened. And those are for people that have a hardship where they can make most of the payment but not all the payment. And that doesn't happen often either. And you can't actually ask for that. They will come up with whatever they think you can afford if they agree to work with you on this basis. The good thing is that they won't foreclose on you during this process, which could take 30 days, 60 days. And in the meantime, you may be asked to make a payment if you can. Otherwise, you'll start making payments whenever the new plan goes into place. They may reinstate the loan. In other words, they may give you what would be the equivalent of refinancing your house and recasting that loan. So let's say, for example, you have been making those payments for 10 years on a 30-year loan. So those payments were based on 30 years, but you paid down a lot. So if they recast the loan, in other words, give you another 30-year loan, you're paying it on a lower amount, which means that your monthly payment is going to be reduced. You're still going to pay all this interest down the road, but you're not locked into it. You can sell the house at any one time and walk away from it, and then cover all of that debt is all rolled into the package. And then there are mortgage assistance programs available for some people to help them with a shortfall. You have to check that with local government. Usually there's a housing office at the city or the county that you live in, and you may be able to ask them if they can provide any assistance for you. That assistance is usually a little bit on the short term kind of basis. So when I'm talking to you now about trying to find a settlement here, that is because you can afford to make the payments. There's a big difference between people that can afford to make payments and people who can't, as I mentioned earlier. And if you can afford to make those payments, you need to do it. I'll tell you something, and I'll probably repeat this again. Let's say that you are in a position where you can afford to make the payments in the future, and you can produce something that shows that you have the income to do this. and you can borrow the money for, let's say you're 2 months behind and they're ready to foreclose, and you get this all worked out with them, then start making payments again, borrow the money to make the payments. Or let's just back up a little bit. Let's say that you are several months away from a potential foreclosure. You've been making the payments, but you know you have to stop. You're running out of money. You've been borrowing it from this place and that place, and eventually there's going to be an end to it. Well, you're in luck, because if you have been making the payments all along, then the mortgage company doesn't have a clue that you're in financial trouble. It's time to call them and talk to them about it and work out a solution that I just mentioned, one of the number of solutions that I just mentioned, and explain to them that you're going to get to a point here in about 2 months or 3 months where you won't be able to make a payment at all. And what they'll do is they'll work out something for you which will push some payments out. So they will tell you you don't need to make payments for the next month or 2 months while this thing is being worked out. And ignore that. If you have the money someplace that you can borrow, make those payments, because in the end, once this is all worked out, if you have missed payments, that's terrible. A foreclosure is on the same level as a missed payment. There's almost nothing worse than a payment that went over 30 days. So if you can make those payments all along while you're doing this, even if they tell you not to make the payments, you're going to come out of this better off with your credit report. And I know some of you probably thinking, oh, I'm not really worried about the credit. It's already, bad situation, etc. Listen, it can get really bad with a foreclosure or late payments on your mortgage. It's one thing to have late payments on a credit card. It's entirely different to have late payments on a mortgage. You can pay off that credit card and never have another payment, and then as it ages, 6 months, a year, 2 years, the hit on your credit will diminish over time. But these late payments on the mortgage, they take longer because the mortgage is still going to be with you. So let's go into the loan servicer halting that foreclosure action for a workout. Again, I want you to be very clear that they will do this if they agree that you are a candidate for this. And you need to be sure that you make those payments on time afterwards, because they may not work with you a second time. A first time, yes. A second time, maybe no. So if you think you can't make these payments down the road, you can make them for a while, like 6 months or so, but then you're going to be running into trouble again, then that action is not really for you. You want a permanent solution to your problem, and you can work that out with the lender, but you have to work out the right kind of solution. And the one I'm talking about, again, is where you can continuously make a payment. Now, it may not be the same amount. The mortgage company may work with you on a lower payment, but at least there is a payment and there is a solution. So now let's talk about those of you that are in a position where you won't be able to make that payment down the road. And you are in a position where you have equity in your house. So the best thing you can do is work with the lender and explain to the lender that you want to do a sale of your house, so you can pull out the equity in the house, and that way they'll get paid the full amount. So there's a method to do that. The lender will tell you to contact a real estate agent, which you should have already done listening to this. Contact a real estate agent, talk to the real estate agent, say, look, I need to sell my house because I'm going to get to a point where I cannot afford to make the payments. I don't want the house repossessed because I will lose equity in it. Now, in theory, anyway, the lender is supposed to sell the house and then give you whatever is left over, but the lender doesn't care what they sell the house for. So if the house is worth $300,000, it could be sold at the courthouse steps for $200,000, and your equity is just gone. So you don't want that to happen. You want to get a real estate agent involved right away, get that real estate agent involved with your lender, and make sure that the lender is working with you so that foreclosure action that hasn't started yet won't start. And they give you a break. They give you the opportunity to get into a sales situation where maybe it takes 60 days or 90 days to sell the house, and they may even tell you don't make payments during that period of time. And I come back to what I said earlier. If you are in the process of selling your house and you know it's going to sell, and there's equity in the house, that's different from a house that has no equity. I'll get into that in a moment. If there's equity in that house, then you want to make sure that they understand this, and they will tell you not to make payments. But if you can make payments, make them. Make every single payment, because you know you're going to get money out of that house, which is good because you might have a relative you can borrow the money from, and you know within 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, you'll be able to give them the money back. And if you keep making those payments, and then the end result is your house is sold and you've never missed a payment, your credit's not going to suffer as a result of that. Now, maybe you weren't paying your credit cards or other things. Hopefully you continue to do that, but you'll have cash out of your house, and hopefully you can pay off any of that other debt. But at least on the mortgage debt, you are not showing that you are missing payments, which is going to be important because you're probably going to want to buy a house down the road. And this is one way to do that, is to work with the lender in advance. Don't wait until you get a notice. If you know in 2 months you won't be able to make that payment, get out in front of it right away. This is actually the best way that you can take care of liquidating your house, getting the cash that you need, making sure that your credit is in good shape. For those of you that have lost your source of income, and you just can't make those payments. You can't even make a small payment. If your payment's $1,500 a month and you can't make, $1,000 a month, I mean, the mortgage lender is going to want something substantial from you, and you've got to prove you have a source for that too. That is the reason for us talking about this as a separate issue, because lenders don't want to work with people that don't have a source of income. That may seem silly to you, but it's pretty obvious that if you have no source of income, there's no guarantee of repayment, and that's not going to stop a foreclosure. But there is something that will. If you have a house that has no equity in it, and I'm putting you on the side of the people that don't have any income, which is nearly the same, but if you have a house that has no equity, or so little equity that after you pay the real estate commission or whatever other costs to sell it, there won't be anything left for you, or you'll be negative, then the deed in lieu of foreclosure is one of two methods to deal with your situation. Now, a deed in lieu of foreclosure is simply saying that you are going to give your deed back to the lender, and they don't need to foreclose on you. You'll just walk away. You get nothing, they get the deed to your house. Now, this is fairly common. It doesn't happen as often as you would think, but it's a fairly common element to use in a foreclosure situation. It was very common back in the late 2000s when we had the issue with all the real estate problems. So that's more or less where it kind of came from. But basically it's this. In the simplest terms, you could lay the keys on the counter and walk out the door. Now, you don't do that exactly. What you do is you contact the mortgage company and you say, I can't afford to make this payment. I don't have the funds to do this, and I want to do a deed in lieu of foreclosure. Now, this helps you in a big way, because there won't be a foreclosure on your credit report. This is a deed in lieu of foreclosure, so you're giving up that house. Now, typically you won't do this if you have equity, because we already went through the equity sale above. But when we talk about the deed in lieu of foreclosure, we mean that you are working with the lender so that the lender doesn't have any issues here. And normally that means that the house is in pretty good condition, or at least fair condition. You haven't tried to destroy it, and they can just take that house and they can put it on the market and they can sell it the way it is. And then they'll get whatever they get from it. They may even get a little bit more out of it, but the point is that they won't have to spend the money putting you through the foreclosure process. because in the foreclosure process, it may take them 90 days to get access to the house. And yes, you can live in it for 90 days, but having that foreclosure on your record is absolutely terrible. So the best thing that you can do if you have no money, there's nothing, is don't just walk away from the house. Contact the mortgage company and work something out with them. Now, there was a time, I don't know if that's the case today with any mortgage company, maybe with one or two, where they would actually give you some cash to walk away from the house so that it's undamaged. And that's a possibility, too. You get $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000, they write you a check, and then you hand them the keys, basically. It's a transfer of ownership, and it's a debt release. You're out of debt. That's it. You walk away. So you no longer owe those payments. You don't have a house any longer. But if your house doesn't have equity in it anyway, you're really not doing anything that's terrible for yourself because you're not holding on to something that is worth anything, really. So that's the time when you just, walk away. So there's some definite benefits to a deed in lieu. First, as I said, you avoid the foreclosure. It's a quick resolution. This is going to take real quick, and they'll give you a little bit of time to move your stuff out. They'll give you a few weeks or so to get your materials out of the house, your furniture, and those kind of things. And it reduces the financial burden that you have to pay. Plus, if your mortgage is a recourse mortgage, they could, in fact, come after you for any loss. If they go to sell the house and they're selling it for less than it's worth, they could go after you for that if you have a recourse mortgage. This way, you avoid all of that. It's a clean deal, and you'll walk away. Now, there may be some tax issues with this if there's a big difference between what they sold it for and what you gave it to them. So let's say, for example, the house is worth $300,000 and they were able to sell it for $250,000. You may get a document from them that's saying that, there's $50,000 of forgiven debt. Now, according to the IRS, there's no such thing. It's basically the same as them writing you a check for $50,000, which means that there's a tax burden for you on this. You may have to pay income taxes on that, depending on your situation. Now, if you're truly in dire circumstances with no income, then it's not likely you'll pay anything. But you could. That's a possibility. But nevertheless, it's just you have to balance all of the issues here. You have to balance a tax issue or the possibility of having a real foreclosure. And a deed in lieu is definitely less damaging on a credit report than a foreclosure has. There will be some negative impact on it, but it will wear itself off over a couple of years or so. It'll be on there for a while, but the biggest damage goes away in about 2 years for that. So that's one option that you have. Don't just let things happen. Jump into it, and if you need to do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, that may be the smartest move for you if you don't think you're going to be able to come up with the income that you need. It's not money in the bank. It's not just a big chunk of change someplace. It's actual income every single month to be able to make that mortgage payment. There is another option available to you if, again, you cannot afford to keep the property. Now, you may be earning income, but you may have a lot of debt, and you just cannot keep the house. You can do what's called a short sale, and that is where you contact a real estate agent and say, I want to put my house on the market as a short sale. And you talk it over with your agent, and then you call the lender. Hopefully you call the lender before you are in dire need. You can do this in advance. You don't have to be 2 months late on your mortgages. Although you may be told that they cannot talk to you about a short sale unless you are 2 months late on your mortgage payments, even though you're not late on your mortgage payments now. That is a problem for a lot of people because they might be able to make payments for a few months, and they've been making them all along. And then if they're told to stop making those payments, essentially stop making the payments, and when they tell you, well, we can do the short sale, but we can't do it for people that are current on their mortgage, what is that saying to you? That is saying that if you stop making the payments, you have to use the reverse of that. They can't tell you to stop making the payments, but that's what they really did. They told you that. I know this for a fact. A friend of mine went through this. They were current on their mortgage, but they couldn't keep paying it. And they said, okay, well, we'll do a short sale with you, but, we have to wait until you're 2 months late. And they waited till they were 2 months late, and voila, everything happened. The mortgage company decided to work with them, and they created the short sale process. Now, the way this works is that you have to show that you have a financial hardship, which is not difficult to do because you have one. Then you have to request the short sale, which is what you'll do. And all this is in writing. Your real estate agent can help you with it too. And then the lender will evaluate the request, and most of the time they will do something with you on this. And then they'll negotiate. They'll talk to the real estate agent, and then they'll say, okay, go ahead and do the short sale. And the real estate agent will put it up, and then you put up the amount that you think the house is going to be sold for. Believe it or not, they leave it all in your hands with the agent, even though you're not going to get any money out of the sale. So let's say, for example, houses in the area are selling for around $300,000, and you put this out there at, say, $295,000, just a little bit less, but kind of within a reasonable area. And the bank will approve that almost certainly, because it's in a reasonable number and they want to get their money soon. They don't want to dump this on the market. They've done that before, but that's not where they're at today. So they want a reasonable return on their investment. So they put it out there for $295,000, and then when an offer comes in, the offer, you have to accept the offer first, and then you have to run the offer by the mortgage company. The mortgage company has to look at it, and they say, okay, we'll take that offer, or it's too low. Normally, they'll take the offer if it's reasonable. And then you go back and you can finish the sale. And once the sale is done, then you've got a little bit of time to, obviously, it's as soon as that starts the process where there's an approval, you've got roughly about 30 days to get out, just like any other regular sale. So once that house is sold, you need to start making preparations to move everything out. So what you've done here, if you do a short sale, is you've avoided a foreclosure, which is very important. It's a quicker resolution, just like the deed in lieu, and it's a reduced financial burden on you, and you walk away with no debt. And in this particular case, again, if you have a non-recourse mortgage, which almost all of them are, it means that any losses sustained by the mortgage company will not be charged back to you. This is a clean deal for you to walk away from, and you won't have any debt hanging over your head. Now, we'll go back again over the tax implications. Same situation here. You may have to pay federal or state income tax on any shortfall between the selling price and whatever you owed them. So let's say that they lost $5,000, and they'll send you a 1099 at the end of the year and say there's a $5,000 benefit to you, and that goes to the IRS, and you'll be subject to paying taxes on that money, because that's the difference between what they receive for the house in a sale and what you owed on that house. Again, you have to balance that with the benefits that you get. And most people just go ahead and do this because they'll find a way to pay the taxes if they have to at all. And usually when they're in financial trouble, paying taxes is pretty much the least of what they need to do, because they have reduced income. Well, reduced or no income means what? No taxes. You may have some implications from the period in the year before you lost your job, for example. But there's still that benefit of losing the debt on the house, the total debt, plus not having to make those monthly payments every month. So those are some things that you can do if you have to lose the house. You can do these things before the house goes into foreclosure. Do not wait until the last month. Don't wait until you get the first notice from them. Now, the mortgage company cannot evict you as long as you are making payments. If you know that you're not going to be able to make payments you won't be able to make them after the second or third month from then, it doesn't make any difference. So calling them shouldn't scare you, because they can't do anything until you stop making payments. That's the important point. But working with them while you're still making the payments will give you a lot more benefit than waiting because you were embarrassed that you got that notice that you knew was coming because you didn't make the payment to begin with. And same with those of you that aren't going to have any income at all, is don't just walk away from it. It's going to hurt you down the road. You may not fully understand that credit report, it governs your entire life. The insurance that you pay on your car is based on your credit score. The insurance you pay on your house is based on your credit score. All insurance, wherever you get it, for whatever you're getting it for, is based on your credit score. And it can be significantly different if you have a high score versus a low score. And so you want to make sure that you have the best score possible. If it's been damaged already because you've been having issues with the making payments, don't wait to the last minute. There are lots of places you can go and get some counseling for free. And I've got an article that I want to refer to you in my blog site, which is retirecoast.com. It will be published shortly, by the time you listen to this, possibly within a week or so. And there's a lot more information in there about everything that I've been talking about here. But let me cover a couple more things about the debt situation. And let me give you another. There are so many ways you can fix this so that it's not the worst situation. It's bad, but it's not the worst. Okay? First of all, these are non-recourse mortgages, as I mentioned, most of you. So whatever the situation is, you shouldn't have to pay any shortfall. And that's a good thing. That's something that creeped into the mortgages a long, long time ago, probably part of consumer action. What happened is people used to walk away from the mortgages and they would still owe debt on them, and that was terrible. I do want to talk a little bit about second mortgages, which I haven't brought up. The second mortgage takes position behind the first mortgage. You can't walk away from a second mortgage. That is usually an issue that requires a little bit more attention. Now, there was a time when you could buy a house with both a first and a second mortgage issued by the same bank at the same time. If that were the case, then you can walk away from the second mortgage too, because it was issued at the same time. But in this case, the second mortgage holder is put in a pretty bad position if they aren't aware of this. So you need to contact the second mortgage holder and tell them that you're working a situation out with the first mortgage holder, because you don't want the second mortgage holder to try to foreclose on you as well, which they can do. You want them to be able to work with the first mortgage holder, and they may be able to get something out of this. They could actually take over that first mortgage and then sell the house themselves, or work out some situation with another customer. So on the second mortgage, if they forgive any of that at all, and sometimes the second mortgage holder will actually forgive it because they can't get the money from you. You don't have it. And if that goes away, then you could get a bill for that also. If you're unemployed and there's a second mortgage and you have tons of other debt, lots of other debt, not just the mortgage, but, like cars, things like that you need to keep, but you bought lots of consumer electronics and things like that. You have a lot of credit card debt. If you're in that situation, then you could possibly consider the option of filing for bankruptcy. Now, let me explain something to you that it seems that there are some attorneys who don't explain it entirely correct to people about a bankruptcy. Now, with regard to your house, if that's the debt that's the problem and you don't have a lot of other debt load or anything, bankruptcy will not do anything for you at all. Bankruptcy will not eliminate the fact that you've got to pay off that mortgage or give your house up to the mortgage company. All it does is stall the process for a few months. But you know what happens? The mortgage company is entitled to charge legal fees and court costs and all that interest they're not getting, and that debt will pile up and pile up. So if you want to try to recover and keep that house, you're going to end up with a lot of debt if you file bankruptcy. It is absolutely the wrong thing to do unless you have lots of other unsecured debt. What I mean by unsecured debt is something that doesn't have a mortgage on it. Your car is a secured debt because you have a contract on it, but your credit card is unsecured, for example. So unsecured debt could possibly go away, although the bankruptcy courts today are more leaning toward a repayment plan for people instead of just forgiving all of the debt. So you could end up being worse off because of this delay costing you money. Remember, interest charges every single day. But the legal costs that your lender will throw on top of it could be tens of thousands of dollars, and you'll end up having to pay all of that if you file bankruptcy just to save your house. It's the wrong move. I've already given you several others that won't cost you anything. You don't need an attorney to do it. You can work it out with a mortgage company, and so you don't get into the bankruptcy. Now, if you have to file bankruptcy because you have lots and lots of other debt, you're still going to end up with the same situation as I mentioned to you now. You might be able to discharge all of the other debt in there. Maybe you won't have to pay any of it back. It depends on how the court goes. But you will have to pay more for your house. So it's a choice you have to make, but go into it fully informed. Talk to your attorney about all of the pluses and the minuses here so that you don't just jump into it. I gave an example in my blog about a situation where an individual owed basically just the mortgage and wasn't paying it and decided to file bankruptcy to try to get more time for what, it didn't explain. But what happened was it took months and months and months for this finally to come out. They filed bankruptcy and then they rescinded it, and they filed it again and they rescinded it. And in the end, they lost the house. And there was equity in the house, but the equity was eaten up by all of the court costs and everything else, so they ended up with nothing. They didn't get anywhere by doing that because they didn't really have any other unsecured debt to get rid of. So it was a bad move. Anyway, I'm sorry to jump on that one case, and I am not an attorney, and if you feel you need an attorney, you should go and see one, but just go in fully informed. An attorney is a business person like anybody else. If you walk in and say you want to file bankruptcy, they'll do it for you. So what you really want is you want them to act as a consultant for you initially and say, what are my options here? And tell me what the upside is, tell me what the downside is. And, they won't necessarily get paid a lot of money if you end up going back to your lender. But in some cases, maybe an attorney can help you with negotiating with a lender. But the best thing for you to do is go in without an attorney, because if they get their attorney involved, then it gets pretty messy. So, but nevertheless, you go and see an attorney anytime you want. I'm not telling you not to do that at all. And this is not a discussion that requires me to be an attorney. I'm just telling you what to say and how much you need to know to go in to see an attorney or a CPA or anyone else that's a professional. You should always learn about the process before you go in and start getting charged by the hour for time. Instead of letting them explain it to you, try to get as much information as you can. And you are doing that already by listening to this podcast. And if you go to the article that is in the website, which is titled Stop That Foreclosure Now with Our Best Tips, and there's a link in the notes for the podcast here. Another thing I want to talk to you about before we get this over with today is a wraparound mortgage option. As I mentioned, there's lots and lots of options. A wraparound mortgage is an interesting thing. Let's say that you can't afford the house and you're in that second group. Okay, you can't afford the house, but you want to keep the house. You won't be able to live in it, but you won't have a foreclosure either. So this is kind of an odd situation, but let me explain how it works. Basically, so you have this loan maybe it's not current, maybe it's 1 month late or something, and you contact a real estate agent and you put this on the market and you sell it. But what you sell it for, let's say, for example, the house is worth $300,000 and you owe $280,000 for it. You can sell the house for $300,000 and you've got some equity there. What happens is the buyer will give you some cash up front. Maybe the buyer gives you $15,000 up front, or $20,000, something like that, as a down payment. And they will be making the higher payment than what you're making because you're selling it for more money than you paid for the house. You paid maybe $275,000 for it or something like that, and they'll be making a higher payment. So let's say that your payment is $1,500 a month, and they're going to be making $1,900 a month. So that extra amount is yours to keep. Also, if you have a low interest rate on your mortgage, there'll be a differential there between what you're charging them. Maybe you have a 5% interest rate on their mortgage and you're going to charge them 7%. You'll be able to keep that 2% difference. So what happens every month, they make that payment to the mortgage company. But the mortgage company doesn't know who's making the payment. There's just a check that goes into their account and it gets deposited and then it gets credited on the computer. Okay? So what happens is that the buyer is buying that property subject to the existing mortgage that's on the property. Now, that's just a big fancy term for saying that they owe that debt less the $15,000 or $20,000 that they gave you, and that's the amount that they owe. And what you do is you say, okay, I'm going to give you a wraparound mortgage, which is basically seller financing, for a period of 3 years or a period of, say, 5 years. It's going to be a short-term thing because you can't stay in it that long. So let's say it's 3 years. Basically, they're going to have a balloon payment in 3 years. They're going to owe the complete balance between what they paid you and what you sold it to them for. So, let's say that you sold it for $300,000, they gave you $20,000, so you're going to be getting from them in 3 years $280,000 less whatever they paid the equity payments during that period of time. And then what you're going to do then is when they pay you off, you're going to pay off the mortgage debt. The mortgage debt may be lower. It might be $250,000 at that point in time, and you'll get some equity out of it at the point that it's sold, that the mortgage is completed. The balloon payment is paid off in 3 years. So it allows the buyer to come in to you and essentially get a mortgage without having to spend all the money that it takes to buy a house. There's mortgage fees, there's origination fees, all those things. They won't be paying any of that. So they're going to save several $1,000s, maybe up to $5,000 by buying your house because you're financing the house for them. And you're going to fully explain to them how you're doing this. That there is an underlying mortgage that you're going to be paying every month, and that they're going to be making this payment to you, which will include the insurance and the taxes for the house based on the rate that they paid you for it. And then you're going to be taking care of the taxes and the insurance out of the income that they're paying every month. Now, there's a whole process involved here, and I'm not going to get into that. I can do another one on this entirely. But the end result is that you'll be living someplace else, but you won't have a foreclosure, and you'll still have equity being built up in that house over time. Plus, you're walking away with cash in your hand, which is very important. So what I tell people to do is just put that cash in the bank and use it just in case that borrower decides in a year they want to walk away. If they walk away, the house is yours again. Now, there is some risk there. Most of these homes are sold under a contract a mortgage contract that says if you sell this house, you have to let us know, and they need to get a new loan because we're going to terminate this loan. Now, I'm not telling you to do something illegal because it is not illegal, but you may have a contract with the lender that doesn't allow you to sell the house without paying it off. Now, the lender's probably not going to know that. They won't find out if you don't tell them, and if the person buying the house won't tell them. And keep in mind, this is a short-term fix. Maybe it's just a one-year deal. It's a way for you to avoid foreclosure. Maybe the person buying the house needs 6 months to come up with the balance of the cash to be able to buy it. So basically what happens is you work out an arrangement that works for both of you, and the house actually does get sold. There's a deed of trust involved, so a third party holds the deed, which protects both you as the seller and the buyer as well. So the wraparound mortgage is definitely a possibility for some of you, and it's something you might want to look into. And you can read more about it on the retirecoast.com blog in this particular article and in some others that have been written there as well. I want to talk to you a little bit about taking money out of your 401k. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Unless, and here's the caveat, if you are in that very first group and you have put the house up for sale working with the mortgage company and you want to keep making payments and you know that you're going to have this cash coming, then borrow the money. Don't remove it, but borrow it if you're still working so that you can pay it back. And then when that house closes, you can pay it back and you still have that money in your 401k. But do not use your 401k or your Roth IRA or any of your other accounts to supplement your living if you can avoid doing that. This would be the last thing. This before you're on the street, you would actually go after that because your retirement program is critical. In our article, we talk about some things, some places where you can go, and there is HUD-approved housing counseling agencies, and there's a link in there for those. There's National Mortgage Settlement Program. There's a link in there as well. But the key thing is go to your mortgage lender and go soon and read as much as you can, get some information, understand all the options that you have on the table, not just one or two, but all of them. And like I said, if you read Stop That Foreclosure Now with our best tips at retirecoast.com, it'll be published in another week or so. Then you'll learn a lot more, supplement what I just mentioned here. And hopefully you will walk away feeling pretty good that you've got a solution to your problem and not just walking away from your property or just letting things collapse around you. Take your life into your hands and do something about it. Well, thank you very much for coming to Retire Coast podcast. Again, visit our website. We have lots of articles on finance and lifestyle, and we appreciate your listening. Thank you.